It's now my pleasure to introduce Celine Latulip. Celine is an associate professor of software and information systems in the College of Computing at UNC Charlotte. And the reason I asked her to join us today is when I heard her speak last year, I was so impressed because not only is she applying all kinds of creative practices in teaching her large computing classes, but she also has been really effective at convincing her faculty, other faculty, that this is something that makes sense. And part of that is by giving students an experience that they're so positive about that they've been helping make the case for her by putting pressure, by saying this is something that they want. So anyway, Celine, I'm looking forward to hearing another description of this. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I prefer to walk around and not be static in one place, so I'm going to get hooked up here and do that. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ben, for that great introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really thankful that I was invited to the University of Maryland. This is a great campus. And I really was impressed this morning with the talks that I went to as part of this conference. And I think it's amazing that you guys are doing this every year and that so many people on this campus are actually interested in doing this. It's really, really impressive. And it's something that I'm going to be taking back to UNC Charlotte to say, hey, we need to be doing more of this kind of thing. This is great. So today I'm going to be talking to you about an innovation called Lightweight Teams and how that has helped us at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in our College of Computing and Informatics to really get students engaged in their learning. And this is work that I've done with lots of other people at UNC Charlotte. It's not just me. The Lightweight Teams innovation came from me, but it's part of a bigger project that I'll describe to you, at least to some extent. So what I really want to talk about today is unlocking the power of social learning. Students, by their nature, all of us by our nature, like to be social. We like to talk to other people, and we learn a lot when we socialize with other people. And we don't, in our educational institutions, really take advantage of this natural tendency that people have anywhere to the extent that we could. And so what I wanted to do was figure out a way to do this, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So just to give you a sense of where I'm going in this talk, I'm going to talk about the freshman experience and why I think that's really important. I'm going to talk about what students were telling me that gave me the motivation as an associate professor, tenure track research professor. I'm not a teaching professor. Teaching was only part of my job, and yet I felt absolutely compelled to completely revamp our undergrad intro CS courses. And that's a lot of work. So why would I do that when I'm mostly being evaluated for research? I'm going to talk about what I think is necessary in terms of the settings of education. I think that education has a default setting, and I think that higher education default setting has to change, and what we're sort of doing at a more institutional level to try to achieve that. Then I'm going to jump into lightweight teams. That's the thing. That's the thing I'm really excited about. I'll tell you what it means, how it works, how I'm implementing it. I couple lightweight teams with gamification, so I'll just talk very briefly about the gamification elements and how they work. And then I'm going to talk about hypotheses we had about how this is actually impacting the students in our university. The experiment, and I say this in air quotes because when you're talking about education, there's not really good controls. It's hard to do that kind of controlled experiment, but we'll talk about what we did and some results and what that meant. So that's what I'm going to do today. Before I go on, can people at the back hear me okay? Volume all right? Good? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I want to talk about what I call the freshman fallout. Right? There's just this crazy thing that tends to happen in the freshman year, especially in a lot of STEM disciplines, and I think in some other disciplines too, where these big courses with tons of content and this whole experience of going to university and being away from home for the first time, it's a lot, and it's really overwhelming for students, and we lose students. There's this fallout, and it's a twofold fallout. So we lose students because they quit or they fail, and then these other students who don't quit or fail manage to get through. In some sense, we lose them too. And that's what I saw, and that's what I really wanted to change. So think about, all of you were freshmen once. You all have university degrees. I was there too. Feels like a long time ago, but I was. And I remember this sense of being away from home, having to take care of myself, having to be at a place where I didn't know anybody, and there were thousands and thousands of students, going into really large classes. This is an overwhelming, very anxiety-producing kind of situation for students. So they're going to wonder things like, am I good enough to succeed? Am I going to make friends? What if no one likes me? Who am I going to sit beside? What if no one sits beside me? Right? All of these questions are the things that are consuming students when they walk into your big freshman class. They're not thinking about, I wonder if my calculator is good enough to do this calculus, or they're not thinking about the textbook or your class in particular. They're worried about the social aspects of the experience. And so why don't we leverage this and try to use that to help them actually engage in their learning? I think that a lot of big intro classes have a tendency to weed out students. And sometimes classes are designed to do that. The idea is to weed out poor students so you get the highest achievers. But I think that what this actually happens a lot is that we end up weeding out students who are really smart, who have a lot of potential, who are really capable, but they maybe just don't do well in traditional lecture-based classes. Maybe they haven't had enough preparation. Maybe they came from a high school where they didn't have the classes that most of their peers got in their high schools. Maybe they didn't have good high school teachers. Maybe they lack a support network. Maybe they're first-generation college students and they don't have the social capital to know how to succeed. So there's all these factors that can lead to students getting weeded out who really actually have potential to do great. So that's a bit of a problem. I also think the other thing that's important about the intro classes is that they establish expectations. So those classes that first experience students have, that sets up the idea for those students of what learning in this discipline looks like and what responsibility they have to take or what responsibility they don't have to take. Do you just have to show up for class, fall asleep, cram for the exam, and get through? Rinse, repeat, right? That may be the message that they're getting from their intro classes. So how could we change this and change that expectation? This is a quote from a great Wired article that talks about how active learning versus the traditional sage on the stage lecture model, what I'm doing right now, sorry, how that actually differentially affects underrepresented minorities. So this claim is that it's not a stretch to claim that lecturing actively discriminates against underrepresented students. So if we care about diversifying our disciplines and coming from a computer science discipline where the number of women seems to be dropping steadily every year, I really care. I don't want to be a dying breed. This is really important. Okay, so this is what got me going. I'm a computer science professor. I'm teaching third and fourth year courses. Nobody told me to teach intro courses. I'm tenure track, right? But I'd have these students coming into my class, third and fourth year computer science classes, saying, oh, I really hope there's no programming. I hate programming. And I was baffled. I was like, what? Like, why are you in this major, right? And they were in the major because they liked technology. They wanted the good jobs. They were interested. But their experiences in the intro classes had damaged them. Like, seriously, they were damaged goods. They'd come out of these intro classes, and they basically, hated computer science. So I think students fail in intro CS, and also probably in a lot of other domains, because the course doesn't seem closely related enough to the real-world stuff that got them excited enough to go into the domain in the first place. The traditional lecture structure is passive. They're bored. It's lonely. You may be in a class with 300 people, but if you're just being talked at by the professor, that's a lonely experience. It's actually more lonely than if you were in a class with 3 people being talked at by the professor, because you're surrounded by all these people, and yet there's no interaction, right? And then I think people just don't have enough support. They don't have enough friends. They have no reason to be connected to the program, so it's really easy to quit if things get hard or to fail out and not worry about it. So then there's the students who pass, the course and move on. And I think this is like, fear and loathing in Las Vegas. This is like fear and loathing in CS. They've passed those intro courses, but they hate programming. They're scared of programming. They think programming is tedious and boring. So they've got this horrible attitude. So this was one thing that I wanted to change. I was like, I wanted to computer science because programming and creating technology is one of the most creative things I've ever been able to do. I love it. And that's not the attitude that they were getting from intro courses. So I wanted to change that. But I also think that even the students who make it through those courses, they haven't developed any communication skills or teamwork skills. They haven't made any friends, right? They might have made friends if they joined a club, but their courses certainly haven't helped them in that sense. So I wanted to change all of this. So before we get into how I did this, I want to talk about the sort of broader institutional context in which this is all happening. So I started doing this before we got a big grant from National Science Foundation, but we already had it in our plans, my department chair and I and other people in our college, that we really needed to make big changes. So we have the Connected Learner Project. This is NSF supported. And really, it's like a college-level reset of how we're educating students. So our plan is to change how we're teaching in our entire college. Not just my class, not just a couple of classes, but really at a wide level. And the aim is to connect students to their peers, to also connect them to the community so that they're doing computing for a purpose, and then to connect them to that professional identity so that they know people outside in the computing profession and they feel that they too are part of that profession. So our objectives, and just my part of this project is really on that first point. I'm really about connecting students to their peers. That's what I'm focusing on. So we are going to change the teaching climate, and our plan is to eventually have our entire core of computer science be all taught as flipped classes. The entire core, that's a lot. We're focusing on social learning. We're incentivizing faculty, so we're actually paying faculty to spend summers flipping their courses. We are changing the way teaching evaluation is happening, so instead of students getting surveys where they're asked, what are students asked? Was your teacher well prepared? Was the textbook good, right? Like, things like this that have nothing to do with whether they learned anything, which I think is our institutional goal, right? For them to learn. So we are actually trying to change the teaching evaluation so that they focus on the learning rather than whether or not the teacher was good at presenting and speaking in front of the class. We're also trying to change the RPT process. We've been changing the guidelines for RPT to put more emphasis on teaching and learning. And then we're developing design patterns so that this stuff can be shared beyond our college and then beyond our institution. Okay, so how many people here know what flipped classes are? Can you raise your hands? Okay, so almost everybody. For the one or two who don't, just quickly, the idea is that we're taking the homework that students usually do, where they're actually trying to apply knowledge. That's the hard part, is applying knowledge. They usually do it at home. They have no support. They get stuck. They're lost, dead end. That's it. So you take that, you put that in the classroom, and the content delivery, the information delivery, happens outside the classroom, usually via videos, sometimes readings, podcasts, whatever the mechanism is. The nice thing there is that if students don't quite get something, they can listen again, they can watch it again, they can watch it slower, faster. I've had a student tell me, I love listening to you at double speed. Like, oh, well, that's great, whatever works for you, right? So that's what the flipped classroom is about, is they get the content delivery on their own, and then they're doing and applying and actively learning in the classroom where they have the support of their peers and the support of TAs and professors. That's the flipped class idea. There are a lot of challenges with doing this, and I'm sure a lot of you have been trying to flip or blend your classes, and you know that this isn't easy. It's a lot of work, especially the first time. It's a ton of work. You've got to figure out how to find videos or make videos. You've got to structure the prep work to make sure that they actually do that work, because if they don't do the prep work before they come to class, it's a lost cause. You've got to create active learning activities, right? You used to spend that 3 hours a week lecturing. Well, now what are you going to do, right? You've got to figure out how to fill that time. And then there's a meta education process that has to happen because students have to have this explained to them. And finally, you've got to figure out how to structure things inside your class when students are in there. And that's where the lightweight teams that I'm going to talk about today really fits in. It's a way to structure the classroom. So, but just before we get to that, video homework. We source videos like crazy off YouTube. There's tons of stuff out there, Vimeo. We use TED Talks. Show Me is a technology I use. It's a little iPad app. It's like doing a whiteboard, record your voice. That's a picture of a Show Me. I use QuickTime screen capture sometimes. When I want to show how to program something, I just put QuickTime on my computer, turn it on, program, done. It's really fast and easy. And the other really cool thing that we've been doing a lot of is student curation. So we do summer courses, independent studies, and senior projects where we have 3 or 4 students or 5 students come in, and their job is to collect, find, curate resources for a class that we're in the process of flipping. They get a credit for it. They find videos that they think are appealing to their age group. It's great. And it's really important that you keep the videos short, as I'm sure most of you know. So this is just an example of a screenshot from a Show Me that I did on, programming. And the nice thing about that is because I'm writing like whiteboard style, it's slow. And it's slow enough for students to understand and follow, but they can also speed it up if they feel I'm talking too slow. So the meta education, this has turned out to be really critical. We will often explain to students every second or third class why this class is flipped. We explain it over and over again. We show them the evidence. We explain why this is better for them because students are kind of hesitant. We've had students say, I'm paying, you should lecture, right? I mean, they're really that blatant about it. They don't understand, it's not what they expect, and they need that education. They need to be convinced of this, and if you tell them often and often and often, eventually it sinks in, okay? So we have to do this. There's also an important thing to do here, which is forcing functions, because you've got to make sure that the students actually do that prep work. So I do homework quizzes. There's lots of different ways to do this. You can do homework quizzes that students do online. You can hand them a paper quiz when they walk in the door of the classroom, all sorts of different ways. The other thing, though, that I'm going to show you today is that by structuring your class with something like lightweight teams, you get peer pressure as one of the forces that helps students realize they really have to do the prep work, right? In these types of classes, you can't sit in the back and hide. You can't do it, right? So you've got to come to class prepared, and your peers are going to know if you're not. All right, so just a screenshot. We use Moodle at UNC Charlotte, switching to Canvas soon, apparently. This is what a typical week looks like on my Moodle page. There's this big prep work heading. Here's the videos you have to watch. Here's the chapters of the textbook. Do I have a laser pointer on here? Hey, look at that. Cool. So they have to read the chapters. They have to execute some programs. And I use the completion tracking function. So when they go and they actually watch the videos, this gets checked off. Once they've read the book, they can check this off. Once they've done these programs, they can check it off. Only when these are checked off does the quiz become available. And the quiz has to be completed before the class starts, and it's for grades. So this is super structured. It's like engineered what they have to do before they come to class. And every week is like this. It helps them set up a pattern and understand what the pattern is for participating in this class. And you know what? Students have just come out of high school. They're faced with millions of decisions. This takes away a decision. They just know exactly what they have to do. They don't have to think, well, should I do the reading this week? Well, yes, here it is. You must do it, or you will not get to the quiz, right? So a week in our classes looks like students do prep work, and then they come to a programming lab, and then they come to a 3-hour workshop. This is what would normally be your standard lecture. And this is where I put lightweight teams into practice. Okay, so what are lightweight teams? Let's hear about it.
Lightweight teams changed my life.
Being assigned into a lightweight team was actually very reassuring.
I really enjoyed lightweight teams.
So it was a pretty cool experience.
So those are a couple of our students. A lightweight team is where you put students into teams. They are with that team the entire semester, but they are only working on low-stakes activities. So this is very different from the kind of team where students have a big project that they have to do. They have to meet outside of class. There's a lot of grades at stake. There's very little, almost none, grades here that are dependent on your teammates. So it doesn't matter if you get stuck with a couple of teammates who have zero background or who maybe seem a little slow. It doesn't matter. It's not going to impact your grade. The only purpose of having these teammates is so that you guys can learn together while you're together in class, okay?
The class was gamified, so we still had an incentive to work together, but because our grades weren't dependent on each other, we didn't feel the pressure to just, get the answer done and move on. My teammates were more inclined to help me with any problems I had, and I was more inclined to help them with any problems because my grade was secure and their grade was secure.
So the important thing here is that you don't have that situation where, oh, teamwork, I hate it. This person on my team never does their work. This other person, they never answer their email, so I don't know if they're going to come to the meeting, right? All of that stuff that causes stress, that makes students really freak out and hate working in groups, we've taken all of that away, okay? So lightweight teams is basically teamwork minus the grade stress, and all you get is the benefits of social learning, right? So how do I do this? In the CS intro classes, I create teams. I use the learning management system to give me random teams of 5 students. I do this before the first day of class. The first day of class, students walk into the classroom and say, no. You don't get to sit down. Come here. Look at this list. Find out what team you're on. And, oh, okay, now you know what team you're on? Go look at that map. Go see where you sit, right? And I have a fixed seating plan, and I tell students where they're going to sit. So remember that thing, that social anxiety, walking to that big class, I don't know where I'm going to sit. I wonder if anyone's going to sit beside me. I've just erased it. It's gone, right? There's none of that. So students look at me a little weird the first time, I'll admit. They're like, huh, like what's with this lady? But you know what? It works. So then during the class, they do active learning activities working with their group. And I want to make a point that this doesn't have to have one of the awesome fancy learning classrooms that you guys are going to get when your new building opens. I started doing all of this in regular old classrooms. So check out this seating map. This is a classroom that's slight incline, rows and rows of tables and chairs, a little bit of funny space at the front, which is accessibility space for wheelchairs. But basically what I did was I created these groups of 5, and so you see group L here, 2 people behind, 3 people in front. If we look here, group B, 2 people, 3 people, whatever. So I don't stretch them out across the row because then they couldn't collaborate, right? I put them into groups. I'm very specific. I'm very, I say that this course is engineered. I engineer the heck out of this course, right? I really plan and get down into the details of how is this going to work so that students can work together. And that's their seating plan, and that's what they do. Then they do these active learning activities. So paper problem solving, case studies, design exercises, but the anchor is clicker quizzes. So we use clickers. This is Eric Mazur's pure instruction methodology. So this is what a standard quiz might look like, projected on the screen. You see, oops, that's not what I wanted to do, sorry. You see that they have, there's the polling, so we know how many people have responded so far. We might use a countdown timer sometimes. I also will often hand out supplementary material. So I might hand out a 3-page handout that's got some code on it from a program. And so a lot of people, they think clicker quizzes, oh, it's multiple choice. The only thing you can do is regurgitation and definition questions, right? Do they know the proper vocabulary word? You can do so much more with these. So I have students do synthesis, analysis, debugging questions based on giving them code on handouts and then a series of questions in the clicker quiz. So they can really do a lot with this. So this is what they see. And then there's a process here. So there's actually a sound profile too. So picture this. Quiz question goes up on the screen. Everybody's quiet. Everybody's reading it. And then they're allowed to talk to each other. Noise volume starts to go up, discussion, and then you just hear all these clickers slam down on the desks, right? Because they click, put their clicker down, and then they wait, and they're watching that thing to see when everybody's put their answer in. Then I move on, and I show the histogram of answers. So how many people said A, B, C, D, but not the right answer, right? And So they look, and if they see right away that, there's a wide variation, they're all like, oh, right? Because they know what that means. They know that means I'm going to say, all right, get up, stand up, go find somebody, and this is the method. You say, go find somebody who has a different answer than you, convince them that your answer is right. And the first few times you do this, the students look, they're like, I have to get up? What? But I stand there and I wait, right? I mean, I'm not moving on. Get up. And they learn. And now, when they see, like sometimes now students are getting up, as soon as they see a variance in answers, like, okay, she's going to make us get up. I'm going to go and talk to that person, right? And they do this. They go and they talk and they engage. They try to debate with each other about which answer is right and why. And then I'll say, okay, everybody ready? I'm going to re-poll. I open it again. They answer again. Now, two things can happen at this point. If they've all come to a consensus, great, we move on. If there's still not a consensus, if they haven't taught each other what they need to know, then that's an opportunity for me to step in and do a mini lecture. So somebody last night was asking me, don't you miss lecturing? It's like, no, not really. And I think it's because I do get to do it every once in a while. So they've had a really hard concept. They've tried, they've talked, they've debated. They're still having trouble. We still haven't got the whole class on board with the right answer. At that point, I have a chance to lecture to them off the cuff, 3 minutes maybe, no PowerPoints, just explaining something to them, maybe a whiteboard. And the best thing about this is that at that point in time, these students are primed for this lecture because they've just lost points, right? They just got a question wrong. They don't know what they don't know, and they've just realized that they don't know what they don't know, and now they're ready to actually listen. So that 3 minutes of lecture, if that was buried inside of an hour and 15-minute long traditional lecture, they'd probably be asleep and would have missed it. But right now, they're primed and they're listening, so that's really great. It's important to note that students get points for both attempts. So the first time, if they get it right, great. Then the second time they get it right, they get 2 points. So there is an incentive. It's not like students come to class and say, well, it doesn't matter. She's going to re-poll every question, and I'll get the point the second time around. They'll get less points because they didn't get it the first time. So there's still a good incentive for them to try to get it right the first time. It's also important to note that students don't have to agree. And this is where the lightweight part of lightweight teams comes in. Because imagine you're on a team with 5 people. The other people, maybe they're just not on their game today, and they're saying some really crazy stuff, and they think the answer is B, and you've studied hard. You know that the answer is C. You've got your own clicker. You're not sort of stuck with whatever the team consensus is. So you really are not dependent on your teammate for your grade. It's up to you. You get to decide what button you press on your clicker.
Oh, there you go, bam.
There we go.
This is what it looks like.
It's close enough. It's close enough.
You really want to know?
Okay, so you can see it's not a cool active learning classroom. We have those now, but this is just a standard, regular old classroom. It's hard to see that the students are in groups, but they are in groups. But you can see some of them are sitting on their desks. They're grouped around. This is an extremely casual environment. The students are excited to come here. We have a mandatory attendance policy, and all the students tell us that they think there's no problem with that. Because the thing is we're making it worth their while to come to class. This is active learning. They're getting a lot out of it. They're having fun. They're having a great time. This is like, it's almost party-like, right? And let me just tell you that as an instructor, this is the most fun kind of teaching there is. It's so much fun. Okay, we have gamification elements. So these are just sort of there to complement the lightweight teams. We have tokens and badges and a leaderboard. So the tokens are kind of funny. We 3D printed these little coins that have ones and zeros around the edges. We give them to students as they come into the lab. And then basically, if students ask a dumb question, they're charged a token. And that sounds really, really kind of nasty and harsh. But the idea is that, if you ask a really good question, we're not going to take the token away. But if you ask a question that you could have Googled in a second, or you could have asked your lab mate, or you could have gotten up and asked somebody else and easily gotten help pretty quickly, then no, you're going to get charged a token. So we're trying to teach students to be self-sufficient, to be resourceful, to take control and figure things out on their own, and not just the minute they're not sure go, teacher, I don't know, help, right? We don't want that. That's not scalable. Our labs have 50 students in the labs. We can't do that. So we need students to learn to depend on each other, to learn to recognize that there's other sources of knowledge, and that I, as the professor, am not the sole font of knowledge in the world, right? So the tokens, they're kind of fun. They're interesting. They don't always work. Sometimes students don't ask questions when they should. That can be a problem. Badges. Students get badges. This is on the Moodle system for any little extra piece of effort they do in the course. So if they give a really good answer on the discussion forum, they get a badge. If they find a better movie resource for loops or for whatever the thing is, they get a badge. If they do a bonus question on the lab, they get a badge. So there's lots of these. If they get 10 badges, they get a 1% increase in their final grade. Okay? So a badge is worth 0.1%. It's not worth much, but it's amazing how much students will do. So, and then the way that we tie this into the lightweight teams is that we have a leaderboard on our learning management system. And so the teams, we show how many badges that team has collectively earned. And so there's this sort of semester-long competition. At the end of the semester, the top 3 teams, they get a prize. It's like candy bars. Right? It's not like they're getting $50 Amazon gift cards. I bring in candy bars. You've probably noticed that I have an accent. I'm from Canada. I usually bring them Canadian candy bars. So that's kind of special. But it's just candy bars. But this is fun. It gives the team sort of this coalescing goal to work around. But it's low stakes. It's not really impacting their grade. So our hypothesis for all of this stuff, as you can see, we took this course and we really crazy re-engineered it and flipped it. So there's a lot of different things that we thought were going on. So first hypothesis is that the lightweight teams actually help students learn the material better, that they're really getting more out of the course. So we're not losing them. They're not coming out thinking, I don't know how to program, and I hate programming, and programming is boring, but they're coming out going, oh, I had a really good experience with my first learning how to program course, and I know stuff now. We also thought that just the course would be more engaging for students, that they would report enjoying it more and having more fun and being more into it. In terms of the gamification, we also thought this would actually promote students to do more, to put more effort, and that it would also increase the engagement. And really what I was most interested in is the combination of these two. Do these two together work to create this environment where students work together on teams, really engage with each other, and have a lot of fun, and do a lot of learning? Sorry, I didn't go in there. So does this help students sort of socially integrate? All right, so the experiment, the data that I'm going to report on today is from Intro CS class, CS1 class, in fall 2013 with an enrollment of 92, and then spring enrollment's always a little lower. We collected a lot of very detailed surveys. So we surveyed the students 45 questions mid-semester, and again at the end of the semester, a few open-ended responses, and then we looked at these students' grade performances in the follow-on course to see, did they actually do okay later on. All right, so before we get to this, I want to do an experiment here, and I've never done this before. This could totally backfire on me, but bear with me, let's try this. All right, so can you raise your hand if you've taught a course that had a strong team component? And keep your hand raised if you've done this. Okay, all right. Keep your hand up if you feel like at least 25% of the students in that course really liked the team experience. At least 25%. Okay, keep your hand up if at least 50% of the students in that course really loved the team experience. All right? Keep your hand up if 75% of the students in that course really liked the team experience. Okay. Okay, this is more hands than I expected, so I didn't know how this was going to go. This is good. That means we've got some people here who are teaching courses with teams that actually work pretty well. So, okay, we can stop now. Thank you for playing along. All right, we asked students whether or not they liked being in a team sitting with their team each week. And 90% of students agreed or strongly agreed that they liked being in a team. When I saw this result, I was like, whew, because I really thought the fact that I was telling them where to sit and forcing them to sit in some place, that they were going to really rebel and kind of hate that. You know, and I was always told them, well, I'm Canadian, I'm all about the nanny state kind of ideology, so deal with it. But you know, they really like this. They really agreed that working with their team members to answer clicker questions actually helped them to learn. They felt that this helped them to learn the material.
Being assigned into a lightweight team was actually very reassuring. Because I didn't have a background in computer science or anything related to computer science, I was able to work with my group mates and actually depend on them, and that actually gave me the confidence in working with groups in future courses.
All right, so made him feel like he learned how to do teamwork, didn't have a background, felt comfortable, got through the course, was happy. Good results. All right, the gamification stuff, definitely a little more mixed. What I find with gamification is some students get really excited about it, love it. Other students, eh. But the thing about the gamification is that nobody felt that it actively harmed them. So it's like it works and helps some students. For other students, it's kind of a non-issue. So it can be worth doing. They thought it gave them an incentive. Making it tied to their grade in some small way was helpful. So that was good. This is my absolute favorite result from this research. We asked students, how many new friends did you make as a result of taking this course? And you may think, like, what? Like, why would you ask that? Why does that matter? This is huge, right? If students make friends, then they've developed a support network, they've become integrated, they've become connected to their major, and that's going to be really important. And more than 60% of our students said that they'd made more than 5 friends as a result of taking this course. And that's, to me, just really exciting. That means that all of that social anxiety, we've turned that on its head.
You got quickly associated and comfortable with a small group of people. It was like 5 to 6 people in a group out of a whole classroom. I guess another bonus is that outside of this class, you know, these are still your friends. So we became like a close, type of family.
Did you hear that? He just described a CS department that has almost 2,000 undergrads as a close-knit family. Right? I mean, it's not that it's a close-knit family with all 2,000 of them, but he felt that he had a close-knit family. Okay? So we see these students who we put randomly into groups. Next year, we see them wandering around campus together. They're at restaurants. They get together. These students have become friends, and that's just, it's fantastic. Students also said that, you know, for the most part, that they'd actually consider taking another programming course, because some of the students in this class are CS majors, some of them aren't.
They were my resource. They helped build my confidence, and they definitely were part of what changed my life and helped me to know that computer science was for me.
So Rachel came in, and she knew she was interested in technology. She was thinking about doing a CS major, but she wasn't sure. And the fact that this learning was collaborative and social, and she learned a lot, and her teammates helped her, she decided to major in CS. She loved it. She was like, this is for me. This is it. I'm here. I found what I want. This is performance in the follow-on course. So this is the distribution of grades at the end of the follow-on course. The students who the blue bars represent students who took our class, so they have more A's and more B's. They have fewer C's and fewer D's than the students who took the traditional CS class. Now, this graph is a little misleading in some sense. The two classes are so completely different, it's almost like comparing apples and oranges. But the point is that our students did well when they took the follow-on class, and that's what we wanted to hear.
Computer science came easy to me, and so I was able to teach my group mates what we were learning, and it helped reinforce the concepts for myself. And we also became friends and hung out outside of class, and we still hang out today.
Okay, so Elizabeth makes the point that, you know, she's one of those high-achieving students. She probably would have done well in any CS class. But in our class, she got to teach her teammates stuff that she found really easy, and that helped reinforce her learning. So this helps not just the students who are struggling, but it helps the students who do well because they gain from it too. And again, friends. She's still friends with the people who I randomly put her on a team with. Okay, so what does all of this mean? I like to characterize lightweight teams this way. It's like students walk into a class the first day, big freshman intro class. I'm like, here you go. Here's your 4 new friends, right? I'm handing them friends on a platter. Now, that's not to say that everybody becomes good friends with all 4 people that they're put on a team with, but there is a lot of friendships that are generated and happening. And students also, because of the having to get up and go and debate with other people during the clicker quizzes, it's not just the people at their team that they meet. They meet the people around them as well. So they're meeting a lot of people and getting a lot of new friends. The gamification elements, especially the leaderboard, seem to give the teams a coalescing goal that they can work towards. But it's a low-stakes goal. So again, it's not this high-pressure situation. And that seems to help. I think that you could do lightweight teams without the gamification. I think the lightweight teams you'd still get a lot of benefits from. The gamification just seems to be a nice complement to help it. So where are we going with this in the future in terms of studying this? A few hypotheses. So I think there's long-term benefits here. For retention, because students have a support network, in terms of students being actually able to network and find out about opportunities and jobs and internships and so on, and also in terms of students actually developing their identification as not a student at UNC Charlotte, but as a computer scientist. I am now part of this profession, and I am one of these people. Communication skills. Haven't really talked about this, but I think that this is really critical. So in a typical large lecture hall classroom, you're being talked at, but you never get the chance to really verbalize and practice expressing and talking about and using computer science vocabulary or vocabulary from whatever domain it is. Our students from the get-go are spending 6 hours a week talking about computer science. And I think that this is really important in terms of the way that this can scaffold them when they have to get into these later courses where they do the heavyweight teams and the big group projects. They're now used to talking with each other, so they're used to socializing, and they're used to talking about computer science and programming, so they know how to say the words and how to fit them together and what makes sense to other people and what doesn't. And I think that this, of course, will help them when they get out into industry because they've got this experience of teamwork right from the get-go. Finally, in terms of the more higher level institutional goal, I think this is really exciting. One of the things that we're saying, and this is what Ben mentioned in the intro, is that because we're flipping classes from the beginning, we're getting more and more students who've gone through these flipped classes, and they've had 3 or 4 classes that have been taught with this flipped class structure, some with lightweight teams, some with other structures. They get up to their higher level classes, they walk into a classroom and it's a traditional lecture, and they're like, what? You're just going to talk at me? Where's my active learning? Right? Our students are getting to the point where they're demanding flipped classes and active learning because they've had it for a good part of their core, and now they say, well, this is the only way that I want to learn. I don't want somebody to stand there and talk at me. I could go home and watch a video in my pajamas, right? So this is changing the expectations, and I think it makes students really take more charge of their own education because they control how often they watch the videos, how much of the prep work they do. They learn how to go and find resources and ask other people for help and become self-sufficient learners. And I think that this sort of attitude change for our students and also for our faculty is something that is going to be really important and that we're going to start trying to measure in a big way. So I think that's about it. I want to thank all the people at UNC Charlotte who helped me with this, and I'll just leave you with this ending prescription, which is that if you flip the intro classes and use lightweight teams, then you remove that grade stress, you promote the social learning, and you help students become socially integrated into their program. And that may have some side effects, like a better attitude about your education, better communication skills, and hopefully better retention in your program. So with that, I will end and say thank you. My watch is dead, so I don't know how I am time-wise.
I think we have have up to 10 minutes for questions.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple mics here. Come on up. Introduce yourself.
That was a great presentation. I think you hit on a lot of important things. I just wanted to make a comment about not only does it help them with their social learning and the learning aspects, but in the communication skills in general. But I think we are and we're going to continue to face challenges with our students as they come into school because of the internet. That's how they're communicating most of the time now. So a lot of the children in particular, they don't know how to interact for real.
Face to face, right.
They're interacting virtually, and they really do need that help in general to interact with people in person. So I work with young people all the time, and I teach in a very interactive manner. I put them in groups, and one of the things that they told me that I never realized was it really helped them just to learn how to interact with other people. And so that is it's definitely going to translate into work and
Right.
when they get into the job.
Yeah.
So it's not only going to help them stay in that school and do better at work, but in general. And I think that is just a problem we're going to face.
Right.
And so this really helps. So I just wanted to say that. But thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great comment. I also have to say that, in the domain of computer science, our students aren't really typically known for their fantastic social skills. So, and that's obviously a generalization and a stereotype to some extent, but, there's obviously some basis for that stereotype. So, yeah, the socialization aspect I think is really important. Students need that opportunity to practice this stuff.
Thank you. A great presentation, and it seems to be a lot of fun teaching and having a class. My question is, how many semesters did it take to you to get to this point? And if you plan this to be in one semester, what do you consider the errors that you have made that you probably prevent from making them the next semester?
Right. So I have flipped a lot of classes now. I've been doing this for about 6 years. The first class that I flipped was a class that I'd taught before in a sort of fairly traditional way, and I took 3 semesters to flip that class. The first one I started, it was like, one class every 2 weeks was flipped, and then, the next semester was like, about half the class or 2/3 of it was flipped, and then the final semester it was fully flipped. So I took time to do it because it takes time to prepare all these materials, right? And I wasn't sort of, I wasn't being paid to do that. I just was doing it because I thought it was the best thing to do for the students. When I came to doing these Intro CS courses, I flipped them from the start. So, students in our college already had Intro CS courses they could take. I didn't replace those still exist. I created brand new courses. And I told my department chair, who asked me, do you want to do this? And I was not tenured yet. And I really wanted to do it. I hated the fact that these students were coming through and saying they hated programming. It really bothered me, and I wanted to change that. And I said, yes, I will do it, but here are my conditions. It's going to be flipped. It's going to use a media computation model, so no boring word math problems. It's going to be all about manipulating pixels in students' own personal pictures. And I'm going to use clicker quizzes, and I'm going to do teams, and I need it to be in this kind of classroom that's big enough, and you need to pay me over the summer to do this. And she agreed. So that was a whole summer of getting that course ready. I mean, it really took the whole summer because I had to develop the clicker quizzes, the labs, everything from scratch. It was a huge amount of work. And I had help. So I think I said earlier, I ran a senior project, and I had 4 or 5 students sign up for it, and they became my students who went out and scouted. They looked for videos for me. Every week they did the labs that I was preparing, so they were sort of the test guinea pigs for that. And then they'd come in and we'd do a meeting where we did sort of a curation of the videos they'd found, and we'd discuss and decide which ones were best. And then I'd have them do the clicker quizzes. So I had them help me, and even with all that help, it still took the whole summer. And then I would say that I didn't get it all right. So your question was, did you make mistakes? I did make mistakes. And so I taught the course again a second time and made refinements. And then I haven't taught the course since. I handed it off to somebody else, and I moved on and did the same thing with the next course, and I continue to do this. One of the mistakes that I made has to do with gender and computer science. So the very first time I taught the course, when I put students into groups of 5, I did it completely randomly, and that was that. And I ended up, because there's so few women, there were a number of teams where there's only 1 female on a team with 4 guys. And sometimes that was fine, but there were definitely some teams where it felt like the female student felt kind of isolated. And so after that, from then on, whenever I make teams, I never let there be just a single female on a team. So I'll let it do the random thing, and then I'll tweak to make sure that doesn't happen. So that was one mistake that I made the first time. The first time, I think some of my clicker quizzes were too easy. I learned how to make them harder. Oh, and one thing I didn't tell you about the clicker quizzes that I think is really critical. So I told you about the example where there's a question that's really hard. The students have to get up, they debate, they poll, and then maybe I do a little mini 3-minute lecture afterwards because I found a misconception and I'm explaining it to them. Then I can usually predict which questions are going to generate that kind of thing. And what I do is I create another question that follows it that's almost identical. So now they've been primed, they've had the difficulty, they've got the little mini lecture. Now they get to try again and test their newfound understanding and knowledge. And so this is why these clicker quizzes, which might only have like 15 or 16 questions, can take 1.5 hours to 2 hours to do, because they're really significant, serious, difficult analysis questions, and they get a chance to practice the skills. So thanks for the question.
Kind of a follow-on, but after that initial investment, like that type of system is great for economies of scale. So once you've established that initial prototype, could you talk about, just kind of rough percentages, what it's like in all subsequent courses? So the idea is that we can offer instruction in these online classrooms that after that initial investment in time, theoretically, it leaves you time to do something else, publications, research. Has that been your
Yes, that has been my experience. So. And in the Connected Learner project, where we're giving faculty stipends to flip classes, the stipends are actually in 2 parts. So there's, whatever it is, I think it's like $5,000 the first summer where you flip the class, but then there's $3,000 the next summer to do the refinements on it. Because nobody ever gets it right the first time, and you do want them to, they made that investment, and after they've made that big of an investment, they probably do want to refine it and fix it and make it better. So we're actually sort of paying for that. But then after that, for me, once I've done about 2 semesters, I'm pretty good. Now, after that, you may still want to occasionally update things and change things a little bit, but that's the same with any class. So I think there's a huge investment the first time, and then there's a subsequent investment in refining it, and then after that, it's the same as regular classes. So.
Hi, Celine.
Hey, John.
Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you so much. So I'm a professor in computer science as well. I was going to ask you about content, so the computational media aspect, and how much you shifted the content. So thanks for bringing that up. I think one thing, if you're a teacher in this room, a lot of the things that you're thinking about maybe is just overhead and the raw amount of work that it takes to do this kind of work. So I guess I have 2 questions, and they're semi-connected. The first is the workshop length. So you said for once a week you have this 3-hour session, and I was wondering if you could think about, or you could talk about the decision for 3 hours and not 2 hour-and-a-half sessions or something, and if you think that supports learning. And then the second part really is about overhead. So it seems to me, and I was kind of writing down notes, that many of the techniques you talked about could probably be applied, at least in part, in a traditional lecture type format, like some aspects of the lightweight teams. I mean, you could adapt some part of your lecture to integrate some of the things you talked about, like some of the gamification techniques and so on, so that if you were a professor and you didn't have a chance to fully flip, I think you could apply some of these things.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and definitely some people in our department are taking bits and pieces and making those changes incrementally, bit at a time, and that works, absolutely. In terms of the first question about the 3 hours, that was actually a really very specific decision that I made, because after sort of thinking about the clicker quiz questions and how we wanted to do that, knowing that that was sort of the anchor for what we needed to do, and realizing that in order to really let students delve in and really do hard questions that required them to really talk and analyze and, make scratch notes on paper and work through programs and stuff like that, you wouldn't be able to do enough of that in an hour and 15-minute time slot. And typically people would always, most people will avoid a 3-hour time slot because they're like, oh my God, students are going to fall asleep. Like, I can't keep their attention for that long. We have no problem keeping our students' attention for 3 hours. We do a break at the end of the clicker quiz before we move on to, the other activity that we have planned. So, and then there are certain weeks because we don't do high stakes exams. We don't do a midterm and a final. We do 5 tests during the semester. So there's 5 classes during the semester where after the clicker quiz, then there's a test that they're taking on their own individually. So, but yeah, so little break, and yeah, we don't have a problem with the attention issue. So.
It's time to move on, so let's give Celine a great round of applause.
Thank you.
It is miraculously, essentially, completely on schedule. It's 1:31. Celine's going to be here for another hour and a half, so if you want to chat with her further, you can do so between breaks or try and grab her. And we will sort of delay by 2 or 3 minutes the schedule so we can keep on going. And the last comment is I encourage you to stop by the posters around the room because we had another form of presentation from your colleagues. So thanks see you for the rest of the afternoon.